There comes a moment when silence is no longer strength, but strategy. If you've ever been gaslit, manipulated, or made to question your own worth, this message is for you. Narcissists thrive in confusion and control, but today we're flipping the script. In this talk, we're going to uncover the one question that stops a narcissist in their tracks, not with anger, not with drama, but with clarity. This isn't about revenge, it's about revelation. It's about reclaiming your power with calm, grounded strength. Get ready to see the game for what it is. And finally walk away with your peace intact. Most people throw around the word narcissist like it's just a personality flaw, someone who's full of themselves, takes too many selfies, talks too much about their success. But let me tell you something that might surprise you. True narcissism goes way deeper than ego. It's not just arrogance. It's a defense, a shield, a carefully constructed wall built out of control, manipulation, and denial. And if you've ever been caught in the orbit of someone like that, you already know it doesn't just hurt. It drains your spirit, distorts your reality, and leaves you wondering what's real and what's not. That's not by accident. That's by design. You see, narcissism is rooted in something that doesn't show up on the surface. At their core, narcissists are terrified of being exposed, not in the way most people think, but exposed emotionally. Vulnerability is their greatest threat. Accountability feels like danger. Being truly known, truly seen, is like standing without armor in a battlefield they've built around themselves. So they overcompensate. They construct an image, powerful, perfect, untouchable. They need that image to survive. But behind that carefully curated mask is a person who's afraid of being ordinary, of being questioned, of being held responsible. So what do? They manipulate, they twist conversations, they shift blame, they lie in subtle ways that sound like concern. They condition you to think that you're the problem, and the longer you stay, the more confused you become. That confusion, that's their playground, because if you're constantly questioning yourself, you won't question them. If they can keep you off balance, emotionally exhausted, unsure, then they win. Not because they're smarter, not because they're stronger, but because they've played this game for so long. They know exactly how to press your buttons, how to apologize without changing, how to gaslight without flinching. Let's talk about that word for a second. Gaslighting. It's not just lying, it's rewriting your memory while looking you dead in the eyes. It's saying that never happened when you know it did. It's making you question your sanity so they never have to question their behavior. And it works for a while, until one day you start to wake up, you start to feel that knot in your chest every time they speak. You start to notice how your smile fades when they walk into the room. You start to realize that the love you thought was real came with too many strings, too much pain, and too little truth. Narcissists need people, don't get it twisted, but they don't connect to people the way you do. They use people to reflect back their illusion. If you admire them, you're valuable. If you challenge them, you're a threat. It's not relational, it's transactional. You're not loved, you're leveraged, you're not heard, you're handled, and if you start to pull away, they'll panic, not because they miss you, but because their control is slipping. They'll love bomb you, they'll say all the right things, but it's not real, it's a performance, because as long as you stay confused, they stay in power. But here's the truth, narcissists don't want to be questioned. That's the crack in their armor, because a question, the right question, threatens to unravel the entire illusion. Not an accusation, not a confrontation, a question, because a question demands a pause, and in that pause, you're no longer playing their game. You're inviting truth into the room, and truth is something they've spent their entire life avoiding. See, the psychology of narcissism is built on one fragile belief. If people knew who I really was, they wouldn't love me, and so they lie to everyone, including themselves. They pretend, they project, they blame, and the sad part is, most of the time, they don't even realize they're doing it. It's instinct, it's survival, but just because you understand it, doesn't mean you have to excuse it. Understanding helps you detach without guilt. It helps you say, this wasn't my fault, and that clarity, that's where your power begins. So let me ask you this. How many times have you stayed silent just to keep the peace? How many times have you walked away from a conversation more confused than when it started? How many times have you told yourself, maybe it's me, maybe I am overreacting? That's not you being weak. That's you being emotionally manipulated by someone who depends on your silence to keep their control. but not anymore. Because once you understand what's really going on, once you recognize the pattern, you're not caught in it anymore. You're not controlled by their moods, their charm, their silent treatment, their twisted version of reality. You see it for what it is, a house of mirrors, and the moment you stop reacting, the moment you stop defending yourself, proving yourself, explaining yourself, you step out of that house. You walk into clarity, into peace, into power, and it all starts with one thing: recognizing the game. Once you do that, you're no longer a player, you become the observer, and from there, everything changes. You know, there's something most people completely overlook when dealing with a narcissist. We spend so much time trying to argue, trying to prove our point, trying to get them to just see what they're doing. And what happens every single time? You end up more frustrated, more confused, and even more drained than when you started. Why? Because the narcissist isn't interested in truth. They're interested in control, and there's one thing that control can't coexist with: a question. Now that might sound too simple, like, how can a question do what yelling, crying, explaining, or even leaving sometimes can't? But here's the deal: narcissists are masters of the monologue. They thrive in conversations where they dominate, deflect, and derail. But ask the right question at the right time, and it does something they aren't prepared for: it interrupts their script. See, they have a formula. They know how to twist your words, how to bait you into defending yourself, how to flip the script so fast that suddenly you're the one apologizing. Again, but a question that breaks the rhythm, that forces a narcissist to pause, and in that pause, even for a moment, the mask slips. Let me give you an example. Say a narcissist just finished blaming you for something you both know wasn't your fault. Maybe they were caught in a lie, maybe they did something hurtful, and instead of taking ownership, they turn it around on you. They say, if you weren't so sensitive, I wouldn't have to talk to you like that, or, you're just always overreacting, nobody else has a problem with me. And now you're backpedaling, wondering if maybe you are too sensitive. But what if, instead of defending yourself, you simply asked, why do you feel the need to speak to me that way when you're upset? And now pause right there. You didn't accuse, you didn't raise your voice, you didn't even challenge their version of events, you just asked a question. And here's what happens internally: they start scrambling, because now they have to provide clarity, they have to justify behavior that deep down, they know doesn't hold up. And narcissists hate that. They don't want to examine their motives, they want to justify them, and a question, especially a calm, direct one, cuts right through the fog they've created. Why? Because questions invite accountability, and accountability is the one thing a narcissist runs from. They live in a world where everything is someone else's fault, where their actions are always reactions, where pain is something they feel, not something they cause. So the moment you turn the spotlight back on them, not through blame, but through a quiet question, they're exposed. Not in front of a crowd, not in a dramatic confrontation, but in that silent space between question and answer. That's where the truth starts to show. You see, narcissists fear being truly seen. They don't want you to witness the insecurity behind the arrogance, the shame behind the superiority, the fear behind the control. A well-placed question does just that. It pulls the curtain back, not with force, but with focus. And the beautiful thing is, you don't have to argue. You don't have to yell. You don't have to explain yourself over and over again. You just have to get curious. Not curious about them, but about the pattern, about the moment, about what's really being said underneath all that noise. But let me be clear, this isn't about trying to change the narcissist. It's not about cornering them, winning an argument, or proving you're right. That's a trap, and one they want you to stay in. This is about reclaiming your mental clarity. It's about shifting the energy from defense to observation. Because the second you start asking questions, you're no longer dancing to their rhythm, you're setting your own. And yes, they'll notice. At first they might dodge it. They'll laugh it off, act confused, maybe even throw another accusation your way. That's okay. Their discomfort is a sign that the question landed. Don't expect honesty, don't expect self-awareness. That's not the point. The point is, you're no longer playing the game, you're watching it. And once you're watching it, you're no longer manipulated by it. Think about how different your conversations would feel if you weren't trying to protect yourself every second. if you didn't feel the need to justify your emotions or rehash events over and over again just to be believed? What if instead you let the silence do the work? What if you asked one direct, honest question and then let it hang in the air without trying to fill it? That's what narcissists can't stand: the stillness, the scrutiny, the possibility that their illusion might not hold up under a little pressure. And here's where it gets powerful. You don't need 100 questions, just one that's rooted in clarity, not emotion. One that reflects reality, not accusation. One that shifts the power without raising your voice. It might be, why do you twist things every time I try to be honest with you? Or, why does being right matter more to you than being kind? Or even, what are you afraid will happen if you just tell the truth? These are questions that don't just expose behavior, they expose intent, and when you can see intent, you can finally stop making excuses for it. You're not crazy, you're not dramatic, you're not overthinking, you were just up against someone who made confusion feel like normal. But now you're learning how to bring clarity back into the room, quietly, powerfully, one question at a time. Let's talk about timing, let's talk about delivery, because if you want to expose a narcissist with one powerful question, you've got to know when and how to ask it. This isn't just about having the right words, it's about understanding the moment, the setup, because if you ask too soon, it'll bounce right off. Ask it with the wrong tone, and it becomes fuel for their fire, but ask it with precision, with calm, and at the exact right time. It can pierce straight through their mask without you raising your voice or breaking a sweat. This isn't about catching them off guard or setting a trap. It's about recognizing the moment when the mask is slipping, when they're trying to spin something that doesn't make sense, when they're pushing buttons just to trigger you, when they're so sure of their control over the situation that they've let their guard down. That's the moment you wait for. It usually shows up in a familiar way. They say something that blames you for the very thing they did. They flip a conversation completely upside down. You walked in trying to talk about how they hurt you, and now you're defending your tone, your emotions, your past. That's their game they provoke, and then they sit back and watch you unravel. Why? Because if you're reacting, you're not thinking. And if you're not thinking, you're easier to control. That's the setup they count on every time. But what if, instead of reacting, you paused? What if you didn't take the bait? What if you took a breath, grounded yourself, and then calmly asked the one question they never expect? That's the shift. That's when you stop dancing to their rhythm and start setting your own. And here's the trick. It's not just the words you use. It's how you use them. Your tone has to be level, grounded, curious, not sarcastic, not bitter, not defensive. That takes self-control, and let's be honest, it takes practice, because everything in you may want to scream, cry, or walk away. But when you speak from calm, from presence, the narcissist doesn't know what to do with that. They're ready for the fight. They're not ready for clarity. Imagine this: you're in one of those circular conversations, the kind where nothing ever gets resolved. You say, "That hurt me." They say, "You're always too sensitive." You say, "I just want to understand why you did that." They say, "You never appreciate anything I do. You've been here before. You know how it ends." But this time, instead of trying to explain yourself, you say, "Can I ask you something?" Then silence. You don't rush, you don't fill the air, you let the moment land. They'll either say yes or deflect. If they say yes, you ask, "Why do you turn things around on me when I share my feelings?" And then you stop. You don't follow it up, you don't justify it, you don't soften it. You let the silence carry the weight, and if they deflect, if they say something like, "What are you talking about?" Or "You're the one who always does that," that's okay too, because even their reaction is revealing. Their inability to stay with the question is the answer. That's the beauty of it. You're not trying to make them answer. You're giving yourself the answer. But again, the power isn't just in the question, it's in your posture. You've got to be the calmest person in the room. Not emotionally numb, not pretending, genuinely calm. That's what makes the question land. If you ask from a place of anger or sarcasm, it becomes an attack. But if you ask from stillness, it becomes truth, and truth doesn't need to yell. A narcissist thrives on energy, your energy. Your defensiveness, your tears, your explanations. When you stop supplying that energy and replace it with stillness, they lose footing. They don't know where to go. They either lash out or fall into silence. Both are signs that the question hit its mark. Now here's something else to consider. You don't need to ask the question in the middle of the storm. Sometimes the best moment comes later, after the chaos has settled, after the argument is over, when they think everything is back to normal. That's when their defenses are down. That's when they're least prepared. You're not punishing them. You're positioning yourself. You're giving that question the space it needs to land. And sometimes, it's not even about saying it out loud. Sometimes the question lives in your eyes, in your silence, in your refusal to play along. There's a difference between reacting to a narcissist and responding with wisdom. One keeps you trapped, the other sets you free. And when you master the timing, when you know the moment to speak and the moment to wait, you shift the entire dynamic without ever raising your voice. Let them underestimate you. Let them think you're too soft, too quiet, too emotional. Let them think they've still got control. And then, when the moment is right, let your question do the work. One question, calm voice, no defense. No chase, just truth. That's how you shift the balance, without force, without drama, and without losing yourself. Now we come to the heart of it, the question. The one that doesn't yell, doesn't accuse, doesn't beg to be understood. The one that simply exposes, not because it's clever or confrontational, but because it's honest. Honest in a way that a narcissist cannot handle, because narcissists don't fear conflict, they live in it. They don't fear being challenged, they're used to spinning their way out of arguments. What they fear is the quiet, direct question that shines a light on their behavior without giving them a single place to hide. So what's the question? Why do you need to hurt people to feel powerful? And yes, that may sound simple. It may even sound too straightforward. But that's exactly why it works, because it bypasses the noise. It doesn't leave room for games or wordplay or blame. It goes straight to the root, and it's not just what the question says, it's what it means. It says, I see what you're doing. It says, I'm not confused anymore. It says, I'm watching, not reacting. You're not asking for an apology. You're not looking for a breakthrough. You're naming something that, deep down, they spend their entire life trying to avoid. The truth that their power is hollow, that their control is a mask for pain, and that the way they treat people isn't confidence, it's insecurity in disguise. And you'll see it in their eyes the moment you ask. Some will flinch, some will scoff. Some will go silent, some will explode, not because the question is unfair, but because it leaves them nowhere to go. See, narcissists are masters at running circles around you. They take your emotion and use it against you. They reframe the argument, they accuse you of attacking them, of misremembering, of being too much, but a calm question, one asked without fear or fury, disrupts all of that. And maybe you don't use that exact version of the question. Maybe it's, why does controlling other people make you feel safe? What are you afraid will happen if you're just honest? Why do you always need someone else to be the villain? Whatever the variation, the essence is the same. You're speaking to the pattern, not the performance. You're stepping outside the loop they've kept you trapped in, where you defend and they deny, and nothing ever gets resolved. You're no longer trying to win the argument. You're stepping back and naming the game, and when you do, something powerful happens. The moment you ask that question, you shift the power dynamic without force. You take back the space in the conversation. You stop trying to convince them to care or to change or to even understand, because now the point isn't to get them to answer. It's to let their reaction reveal the answer for you. That's the real impact of the question. It's not the words. It's what comes after. Watch closely. Do they laugh and brush it off? Do they change the subject? Do they suddenly turn it around and make it about you? Or do they get angry, agitated, defensive, even threatening? All of those are responses rooted in the same thing, exposure, because narcissists are never prepared for the moment when their illusion is calmly questioned. It's like pulling a thread on a suit that was never really sewn together in the first place. The whole thing starts to unravel. But here's the key: you don't follow them into the chaos, don't let them bait you, don't explain the question. Don't try to justify asking it. You said what you said, now let the silence do the work. That's where the power lies, not in debating them, but in no longer needing to. Now I want to be honest about something. This moment, this question, it's not always going to lead to change. Narcissists rarely self-reflect, let alone take responsibility, and if you're hoping this one question is going to turn their behavior around, you might be disappointed. But that's not what this is about. This isn't about changing them. It's about freeing you. It's about cutting through the confusion. Because once you ask that question, you're no longer playing along. You've drawn a line. You've said, without screaming, I see you. And more importantly, I see myself, and I won't lose me in this anymore. And let's not pretend this is easy. For many people, asking a question like that comes after months, sometimes years, of gaslighting, walking on eggshells, trying to keep the peace at the cost of their own voice. So when you finally get to that moment, when you have the courage and clarity to ask that one question, it's a turning point. It might be quiet, it might even go unnoticed by them, but you'll feel it. Something inside you shifts. That's not weakness, it's wisdom. And when you ask that question, you're not just confronting a narcissist. You're reminding yourself of who you are, someone who deserves clarity, not confusion, peace, not performance, respect, not fear. And you're saying, in the clearest way possible, I'm not going to shrink anymore, because that's what they fear the most. Not your anger, not your silence, your clarity, your calm, your refusal to be controlled, and all it takes is one powerful question. Let me tell you something most people miss. When you ask that one powerful question, the words themselves are only part of the impact. The real answer isn't in what the narcissist says, it's in how they react. It's in the shift in their energy. It's in the tension that suddenly appears in the silence after you speak. Because the truth is, when a narcissist is exposed, calmly, directly, without emotion, they don't know how to respond in a way that keeps the illusion intact. And that's when their reaction tells you everything you need to know. Sometimes they'll laugh, a fake, awkward laugh. One that tries to make light of your question, to signal that you must be joking. But if you listen closely, it's not the laugh of confidence, it's the laugh of discomfort. They're trying to move past it quickly, trying to disarm you without actually addressing the question, because if they really acknowledged it, even for a second, they'd have to face something they've been avoiding for years. Other times they'll flip it. You're the one who always hurts people. They might say, I can't believe you'd accuse me of something like that. And if you're not grounded in yourself, that kind of response can feel like a punch to the gut. Because you're standing there, in a moment of truth, asking a question from a place of clarity, and they twist it into another attack. That's what narcissists do. They can't sit in the spotlight, so they spin the room around. They need to escape. And the fastest escape route is to throw the blame back at you. But here's what you need to understand. That deflection, that's not strength, that's panic. That's the reaction of someone who's been seen and doesn't want to be. They might double down, they might gaslight, they might go quiet. Each reaction is different, but they all point to the same truth. Your question landed. You might notice they change the subject entirely. Out of nowhere, they bring up something from weeks ago, some unrelated mistake you made, some tiny offense they've been holding onto in silence. That's not just a distraction tactic. That's an escape hatch. They're trying to create a new battlefield, one where you're on defense and they're in control again. But don't follow them there. That's the trap. That's how the cycle continues. You have to stay centered. Because remember, your goal isn't to win a debate, it's to see clearly, and their reaction is your answer. It's not about the words that come out of their mouth. It's about what their behavior reveals in the seconds and minutes that follow. One of the most telling reactions is silence, not the kind that's reflective or thoughtful, but the kind that's cold, distant, punishing. You'll ask the question, and they'll just go quiet, not because they're thinking, because they're retaliating. That silence is designed to make you feel uncomfortable. It's a form of emotional control. The message is, you shouldn't have said that. They won't say it out loud, but their withdrawal speaks volumes. But here's the thing, when you don't react to their silence, when you sit calmly with your question and let it hang in the air without chasing them or explaining yourself, you break their rhythm. You don't reward their deflection with guilt, you don't fill the space with apologies, and in that moment, you claim something back, your peace, your power, your perspective. This is where you stop needing answers from them, because you already have what you came for, you have the truth. It's not in their confession, it's in their inability to respond with honesty, with humility, with any kind of self-reflection. That's the exposure, that's the clarity, that's what the whole question was for in the first place, and here's the most important part: don't try to explain the question. Don't defend why you asked it, don't go into a back and forth about your intentions. That's how the narcissist pulls you back in. They want you talking in circles, they want you second-guessing, but when you stay silent after the question, when you allow the discomfort to sit without filling it, you become unshakable. You're no longer asking for permission to speak your truth, and maybe this is the first time you've ever done that. Maybe you've spent months or years being gaslit, silenced, or made to feel small, and now in one moment of clarity, you've finally named the behavior for what it is. That takes strength, not loud strength, not explosive anger, but a quiet, steady, unmovable strength, the kind of strength that doesn't ask for validation. Now don't expect a narcissist to suddenly wake up and admit everything. That rarely happens. What you will see is their discomfort, their scramble to regain control, their inability to stay grounded in the moment you created, and all of that is data. It tells you who you're dealing with, it shows you in real time what they're really made of when the mask starts to slip. And what you do with that information, that's up to you. Maybe it means setting a boundary, maybe it means stepping back. Maybe it means walking away entirely, but you'll do it with clear eyes, you'll do it knowing that you didn't need to fight or force anything. You just asked a question, you let it land, you watched the reaction, and in doing that, you learned more than hours of arguing could ever teach you. That's the moment the power shifts, not because they answered, but because you no longer needed them to. So now you've done it, you've asked the question, you've watched the reaction, maybe they lashed out, maybe they went silent. Maybe they deflected so hard you could almost hear the walls go up around them, but either way, the moment passed, and now you're left with the clarity you didn't have before. The illusion is cracked, the cycle has been interrupted, and now the real question is, what do you do next? Because this is the part nobody talks about enough. That moment after exposure, after the fog starts to clear. You think you're going to feel relief, and maybe you do for a moment, but then a wave of something else comes in. Doubt, sadness, guilt, even not because you did something wrong, but because for so long your world has been wrapped around this person's version of reality. Their rules, their moods, their approval, and now that you've stepped outside of it, there's an ache, because clarity often comes with loss. Loss of hope, loss of the person you wanted them to be, and sometimes loss of the relationship altogether. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about what happens after exposure, because you need to be just as prepared for this part as you were for the moment you asked the question. First, understand this: narcissists rarely apologize with sincerity. They might offer something that sounds like an apology, but listen closely. I'm sorry you feel that way. I guess I'm just a terrible person then. Fine, I'm sorry. Can we move on now? That's not ownership, that's a tactic. It's meant to reset the power, to quiet your voice without changing anything real. If you accept it just to keep the peace, you'll find yourself right back where you started, confused, resentful, and questioning your own truth. This is why your next step isn't to wait for them to change, it's to respond to the truth you've just seen. You don't need more conversations to explain your perspective. You don't need to convince them to see what they refuse to. What you need now is space to process what's real, not what you hoped was real, but what actually is. You may start noticing the pattern everywhere, all the times you were gaslit, all the subtle shifts in your behavior just to avoid setting them off. How you made yourself small so they could feel big, how often you accepted less than what you deserved because you were afraid of being accused of wanting too much. That awareness can be heavy, but it's also freeing, because now you see it, and what you can see, you can stop carrying. So what do you do after exposure? You begin to reclaim your peace, and that doesn't always look dramatic. It doesn't have to be a big exit or a public declaration. Sometimes it's a quiet decision made in the privacy of your own heart. I will not argue anymore. I will not chase closure from someone who fears the truth. I will not lose myself trying to be enough for someone who only values control. And maybe that means going no contact. Maybe that means redefining boundaries, even if it's a family member, a partner, a friend. I know that's hard, especially when you've built so much of your emotional life around keeping that relationship intact. But sometimes the most loving thing you can do, for yourself and even for them, is to step back, not to punish, but to protect. You'll have moments where you question yourself. That's normal. Narcissistic relationships condition you to distrust your own instincts. You'll ask, was it really that bad? You'll remember the good times and wonder if you made too big of a deal out of it. That's the part of you that wants to believe it could have been different. Honor that, don't shame it. But don't let it rewrite the truth either, because you asked the question, you saw the reaction, and your peace is no longer built on illusions. This is where your healing starts, not with their apology, but with your decision to move forward. And healing doesn't mean you forget what happened. It means you stop trying to fix what was never yours to fix. You stop carrying their wounds like they're your responsibility. You stop contorting yourself to fit into someone else's broken frame of what love or respect should look like. You begin choosing peace, even if it's quiet, even if it's lonely at first, even if no one else understands why you had to step away. Because the people who haven't been through it won't always get it. They'll say, but they seem so nice, or are you sure it wasn't just a misunderstanding? And you'll have to remind yourself that your clarity doesn't require their agreement. You were there, you lived it. You know what it cost you, and that's where strength comes in, not loud, in-your-face strength, but quiet strength. The kind that holds boundaries without bitterness, the kind that walks away without burning everything down, the kind that doesn't need to be right, just free. So maybe today is the beginning. Maybe today is the day you stop waiting for someone to validate what you already know. Maybe today is the day you finally say, that question wasn't for them, it was for me, and the answer didn't come from their mouth. It came from the way you felt when you finally stopped shrinking and started standing. You exposed the pattern. You asked the question, and now you walk forward with your peace intact. If this message gave you clarity, don't keep it to yourself. Someone else needs it too. Like, share, and subscribe to stay grounded in truth. And drop a comment if you're ready to reclaim your peace. Your voice matters. Let it be heard.